It should be connecting to YouTube. So I guess. Okay. Well, I can see us live on my laptop, not on my phone yet. Just going to wait a few seconds, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so live. Okay, so we're live. Thank you very much for being here. So I'm going to, sorry, I have my notes with me. So welcome everyone for the fourth session of the Grand Multiliteracy event. And I'm very honored to have with us Dr. Nayr Ibrahim. And so just to say a little bit about Dr. Ibrahim. So she is the Associate Professor of English Subject Pedagogy at North University. And you're a member of the North Research Group for Children's Literature in ERT and the treasurer for a newly launched Early Language Learning Research Association. And previously, so you worked as the head of young learners and bilingual education at the British Council in France, and you hold an MA in TEFL and a PhD in trilingualism and triliteracy and identity from the University of Reading. You have also been involved in various projects, including reviewing the EU's key competencies for lifelong learning in 2018 and other various Erasmus Plus projects. You have also co-authored with Gail Ellis a book titled Teaching Children How to Learn, which won an award in the 2016 ESU English Language Awards in the category Resources for Teachers. So thank you very much for being with us, Nayr. Is there anything you would like to add?
I would just like to say thank you, Yoshito, for inviting me and, well, for this amazing event. I think it's great that you have put this together, and I think it's so important for us to be able to talk about, you know, our work and hopefully how it impacts on, well, in this case, teachers and parents and children, of course. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. And so right now we're here to talk about one of the many things you do, but it's talking about picture books and how to use them with our children and students. So we're going to talk about how we can do it in class, but also at home, because from what I understand, you teach student teachers to become teachers. And so one of the modules you have is to the use of picture books. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Well, picture books and other children's literature formats. So I also work with graphic novels, for example, which is once again also a multimodal and visual resource that we use in the classroom. And then chapter novels, which are, you know, short novels for children, and very often they're also multimodal because they also have some illustrations in them, and yes, in poetry and chants and rhyme. So, you know, helping teachers. I work with teachers who are going to become English language teachers, or they're going to teach English as part of subjects that they teach. So very often it is around finding resources for developing English language skills, but much more than that. So we'll talk about that as we discuss picture books, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so I believe when you use picture books, you don't only use them with young children, because generally we have the impression that picture books is just for young children, but you use them with older children. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's important. Okay, let me just start with the fact that you mentioned the fact that I worked for the British Council in France, and I did that. I worked there for 20 years, and we also had these intensive holiday classes. And the whole course was around a picture book. So the whole concept of using picture books and developing a picture book as a teaching resource and developing teaching materials around a picture book actually started with my experience or my working at the British Council. Because and this was me as a teacher and also as materials creator. So we were literally creating a full 30-hour course around a picture book. So so that was actually the start. And then
30 hours around picture books?
Sorry?
30 hours around. Oh wow! So it means that there is so much lost.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes, yes. So 30 hours around one picture book, and there's so much you can do with one picture book. And I think people don't. So the thing is, you can also. So the picture book, obviously, used in education, and especially in English language education, is first and foremost used for language development very often. Okay, so you pick a picture book that may have a kind of an interesting story and then vocabulary that you can pick out and use in the classroom to develop a particular lexical set, for example, colors or animals, or but you embed the teaching of that language within a story, which is so much more interesting for children. But I think a picture book has so much more than just language potential. You have the story itself. What is the story trying to say? What is the story about? Is it focusing on important issues, on values, on global issues today? For example, there are some really wonderful picture books out there that focus on environmental issues, that are written for children. And then around the picture book, you can develop cross-curricular work as well. So it's not basic, it's not only developing English language skills, but also looking at, you can use a book from an historical perspective, you can use a book in geography, you might be able to come up with some activities that are more mathematical and more on the science perspective. So you can actually extend the picture book for quite in various different directions. And then you can also then work on perhaps rewriting the story and coming up with a presentation or a play around the story, so the children are actually engaged in the story by recreating the story on stage, and where they put on a presentation for the parents or for the school. They can create artistic outcomes around the story. So there's so much you can do around one picture book. So it really does depend on the teacher's creativity, and teachers are wonderfully creative beings. So they can, when you listen to what they do with one picture book, it's really fascinating. So that's one of the elements. So that's in the classroom. So what I do now with teachers is, because I'm working with pre-service and in-service teachers, it's about trying to help them explore the potential of picture books in the English language classroom. But I think one of the important things about picture books is the pictures. That is the fact that a picture book is both the words, the language, the story, and the illustrations. And the two go hand in hand. The two are intricately connected and linked. You can't actually tell the story in a picture book without the pictures or without the words. They actually both tell the story. So it is really the interaction between the language and the pictures that makes or constitutes a picture book. So one of the definitions of a picture book is that you can't actually tell the story of a picture book on the radio because you can't see the images.
Yeah.
So you need to have the picture book in your hand. And also, because of the way a picture book is created, there's also the whole, like the turning of the pages. It's like that the drama of the turning of the pages. Oh, what happens next?
Yeah.
So, and that's what really engages and grips the children, and that's why they enjoy the stories in Picturebooks so much. And so it's communicating. When I work with teachers, it's trying to help them find all the different activities and ideas to explore all the different elements of a picture book, and not just, okay, the language.
Questions in mind right now, but so with your student teachers or the teachers you work with, where do you think is the maybe the value you're bringing the most? So for example, I guess if I had to plan lessons on a picture book, I would have some ideas as a teacher, but what kind of ideas would teachers generally miss before they know what to do?
I think it's first of all, it's understanding what a picture book is. And I think that's one of the main, that's how I start, because I've actually got some picture books here with me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to use some as examples, because they tell so many stories. And let me just have a look at this example here. So when you're actually, okay, I just love this picture book. It's called Mixed.
Yeah.
And it also exists in multiple languages now. So when you actually start working with a picture book, you need to start with the front cover. So what's on the front cover? How can you get the children to predict what's going to happen in the story, to predict the story just by looking at the front cover? And then you've also got the back. Yeah. The back cover, and the back cover tells you a little bit more about the story. And in this particular book, in this particular picture book, if you look at the different like characters, you've got 3 characters. So one is yellow, one is red, and one is blue. And then at the back, you've got the little group of characters, lots of different colors. Now, what happens between the front cover and the back cover for there to be only 3 colors here, and then all those different colors at back? And so when you start engaging the children or the teachers, whoever you're actually using the picture book with these elements in the front cover, the back cover, and you start asking questions, you start becoming, you basically elicit a lot of ideas. And at the same time, you're helping the children and all who, predict, what might happen? Who are these characters? Why? How did they become so many colors at the end? And so they start becoming curious about the story, and they want to know what's inside the story. And I think we don't use all these elements. I mean, there's the back of the spine of the book as well. Inside the book, I'm not going to open the book because I know that this is public and I don't have the right to use the inside of the book.
Okay, that's fine.
But the inside of the cover, the inside of the covers, both the front covers and the back covers, they're called the end papers. Those end papers also tell part of the story. Yes. The images in those end papers and the way they sometimes change between the front matter and the back matter actually tells part of the story as well. And then there's a title page. And sometimes we don't even look at the title page. We just like, okay, let's go to the first page of the story. And yet this title page also has something in there. Perhaps the illustrator has added an element in there that tells you a little bit more about the story. So all these little elements are there to actually, whet your curiosity and want to actually read. And also they start a conversation. And I think that's also the important thing. They start a conversation about the story, about the characters, and they start involving the children in the story. So I think one important thing about storybooks or picture books and using them in the classroom is that they're not just for the teacher to sit and tell the story and that she reads the story. It's for the children to get involved in the story, to get involved in telling the story, to participate in the read aloud, for example. When the teacher reads the story aloud, the children can participate. Because by the time you've actually worked with the front cover and the back cover and the end papers, you've already, like for example, in a foreign language classroom or in an English language classroom, you've already given them a lot of the vocabulary that they're going to need to actually understand the story. So it's true. So there's various things happening here. You're slowly introducing the vocabulary, but by getting the children involved in predicting what might happen in the story, eliciting their ideas about what they see on the front cover, the back cover, etc. So you're starting a conversation, and at the same time, you're motivating the children to want to know more and to want to read.
I think it's a really good way to start, like, because if you just give it to them, it's a bit like, where do I start? But if you go step by step like that, then it creates curiosity, and then they want to talk more about it. So it's the motivation you're talking about.
Yes, yes, it's a hook. You want to hook them. So how do you hook them? Now, it's really important because also we're talking about this is a multi-literacies event. So we're talking about more than one languages. So how do you hook the children in wanting to read in their heritage languages, in the languages that they use less, the languages that are not their school languages, their home languages, which very often are only used orally with the parents at home, and they are not, so children are not in schools and they're not learning how to read and write these heritage languages. So through Picturebooks, they can hook them, because the picture book is more than just the language. It's the story, it's the surprise at the end. And then this particular book, for example, also has, as I said, it has various translations. And this is the Portuguese translation, which interestingly enough, so the original is mixed, and the Portuguese translation is splash.
Splash doesn't mean mixed, does it?
It doesn't mean mixed. It doesn't mean mixed at all. So another way of getting the children engaged. Oh, look at it. This is interesting. Different translations, and but the hook is the same. It's still the same story. You still have the same 3 characters. You still have that change from 3 colors to multiple colors at the back. What's going on? But it's all in Portuguese. So you can actually hook the children into, if not reading Portuguese, but in listening to you as the Portuguese parent tell the story or the read aloud in Portuguese. So it's how do you, it's creating that connection with books, first of all, with reading as well, in the different languages as well.
I know with my sons we've used picture books and like books in general to hook them, but when there are images, it's so much easier because they get to the gist of what the story is about, and then it creates curiosity for them to want to try to understand what the story says. So my son, who when he started reading when he was 6 or 7, he loved Bookman, and and I bought it in French, and he perfected his reading in French because he wanted to read so much, because the pictures told so much already. It was just like a little effort for him to get to laugh at the images and to understand.
But I think the other thing about images, because we tend to use images, and absolutely correct, rightly so, as a kind of support for understanding. And I think images in picture books do have that, do play that role, but they're much more than that, because once again, as I said, they tell the story, but sometimes they contradict the story, and that's absolutely fascinating. And children are so very aware of what's going on. They can hear the language, and they look at the picture and they giggle because, the picture's not saying that. And I just wanted to bring up one book that I've used, another book that I absolutely love, and it's The Truth About Old People. And throughout the book, you have the text or the images contradicting the text. So for example, here you've got these old people, they're jumping about and laughing around, and you can see this is the front cover, but the text will be saying, old people are boring. Old people are very tired, and the images are completely different. So, and the children are quite capable of interacting between the two and seeing that discrepancy between the two, and they just love it. And then you, as the adults, reading the story aloud with the children, you can also play on that. You can say, oh, old people are boring. Oh, actually, look at these old people dancing and jumping around. Or old people boring? Really? So you can actually play around with that as well, you see. And I think it's also great because very often these picture books and a lot of the picture books are being created now, and always have been, also touch on issues that are relevant, that are important for us. And I think, for example, this one looks at, okay, we have this image, the stereotypical image of old people, and actually, maybe they're not like that, sitting, just sitting quietly, like on their armchairs and feeling tired. Well, maybe they're not like that. So I think a lot. So you can also, it also allows for these conversations around stereotypes, and it breaks stereotypes. So you can have this conversation with children, and you can ask them to think about, so is this, is this what you think about old people? Do you think old people are like this, or do they also like skateboarding and whatnot? So you can have these conversations with children, and I think that's the one thing, that's the interesting thing about picture books. It's not a passive activity. It's not the children sitting there quietly listening to the parent or the teacher read the book. It's about getting the children involved and participating in the whole storytelling and story read aloud process.
Thank you. We have a question from Uta Limacha Revolt.
Yes.
That you know.
Hi, Uta.
So far she said that picture books for older language learners are good to make language learning more appealing. And she's asking how can we use picture books with older children, like 13 to 15 years old?
I think you mentioned this right at the beginning, that we tend to think that picture books are for children in preschool, perhaps grade 1 and 2, and then children, like sort of grow out of picture books, and that is so not true. Picture books can be used at all ages, including adults. I use picture books with my teachers. Of course, I know they're going to become teachers, obviously. So, it makes sense that I'm using picture books for them to be able to use picture books when they're teaching their children. But it's more than just that. Picture books can be used to bring up, and even with older children, to bring up discussions and to talk about important issues. And I have this wonderful picture book. Yes, I do have it here. I'm just going to show you this picture book, which I think is, it's heartbreaking. And at the same time, it's such a beautiful picture book. It's called Hear My Voice, and it's a bilingual picture book. Now, I just love bilingual picture books. So it's Escucha mi voz. So on one side, and then on the other side is Spanish. So the book really is, so on the one side, you've got the story in English, and then you've got the story in Spanish. And it's about, it's interesting, because if you look at the images and you start asking children about what you see, you can see a kind of a barrier, and you can see, all these different barbed wire, etc. And you start asking, and then you look at you look closer, and you see these sort of shadowy figures, sort of, climbing or walking along. It looks like they have a little backpack, etc. And you start asking children, okay, or children or adults. I do this with my adult teachers. So what's going on here? This picture book is about the treatment of children at the US-Mexican border. And it's actually based on interviews with children about their experiences. And that's why it's called Hear My Voice, because the text in this picture book is actually the voice of the children. It's what the children said to these interviewers about what they went through and how they were treated. So it is the actual voice of the children. This book is such an important book for adults. Because of the theme it covers, because of the important it talks about child protection. It talks about neglect. It talks about how children are taken away from their parents and thrown into cages. We know what happened at that point. So in that situation, so it's an important picture book to use with any age group. You can actually use this picture book. It's got very little writing in it. It's just really, and each page has it's a comment that the children would say. But in the social sciences class, for example, it's a springboard for loads of discussion around immigration policies, around all the issues that all the conversations we see on television. I mean, you can actually connect it to all the situations that we are, in Europe, in the States, about immigration, about refugees, about letting people in or not. So it's a wonderful, it's a very important springboard for that discussion. So picture books can be used with any age group. Another picture book, which unfortunately I don't have here, is actually the house that, don't know if anybody knows the poem, The House That Jack Built. And it's an accumulative poem. It builds the house that Jack built. So in the house is Martin, and there's a cat, and the house, oh gosh, I can't remember the poem itself. But this poem was actually turned into a picture book, and the name of the picture book is The House That Crack Built. Crack as in drugs. And the whole crack as in drugs. And it's the same accumulative story with the same rhythm and the same rhyme, but it's about drug use and abuse and the impact on individuals, the impact on society, the impact on families. So that is not a picture book for 5-year-olds. It's a picture book for teenagers and adults. So yes, picture books can be used with any age group. What you need to do is select the right picture book for the purpose that you want to use it for.
And Uta is adding that pictures or making the story less abstract, because it's not just text, you can visually see it.
It makes the story less abstract, yes, but at the same time it makes the story more real in a way, because you can connect with the pictures. And if you don't if you don't have the language, you can even through a language you may not know very well, or even a foreign language, through the pictures you can connect with the story. And it's an artistic connection with, it's a visual, artistic, colorful connection with an important theme. So that adds to the experience of reading and engaging with that particular story. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. You just talked about a bilingual book, and I was wondering, so this book is like one side English, the other side Spanish, so you need to turn it that way. There are bilingual books where you have both on the same page. So I don't know if it makes a difference, but what's your thoughts on bilingual books, whether it's for bilingual or multilingual children or monolingual children?
I love them. I love bilingual books. I think they're wonderful, because bilingual books actually are a resource that already represents that bilingual living or multilingual living, because it contains the two languages. We tend to use, monolingual books, absolutely fine. They've got absolutely wonderful stories in them. But the bilingual experience is not in there. And I think bilingual children, multilingual children, we have so many children nowadays in our classrooms that have different backgrounds and different languages. They need to see themselves in books as well, in literature.
That's true, yeah.
Because if we look at picture books as, or children's literature as picture books as, for example, a mirror, can I see myself in picture books? And a window, can I see out and can I see the world? Can I see differences? Can I see other cultures and other ways of living through picture books? That's so important, is that mirror and windows. But that mirror also, how can we represent all these different children that we have in our classroom? And there have been some really wonderful picture books that do try to work on, I'm just trying to find a couple of examples here, but I've got one that I absolutely love. And this is one of my favorites. And this is this one, and it's called Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match, or in Spanish, sorry, I know the lights are not very clear. There we go. Yeah. Marisol McDonald Non Combina. It's an English and Spanish picture book. And this is all Marisol. She's actually in upside down on the front cover. And it's by Monica Brown and then the illustrations of Asara Palacios. And it's written by someone who is also bilingual and who also had this experience of being brought up in a bilingual household.
Okay.
And so the picture book is a wonderful mirror or image for multilingual children to actually find themselves in literature. Because Marisol McDonald speaks both English and Spanish. She's got an English-speaking dad and a Spanish-speaking mum. And then throughout the book, and the images as well. And that's interesting because the images represent this mixing of cultures and mixing of languages in the book, as well as through the images. Obviously, the story and the language and the images represent both represent that multilingual living. So I think this one is a wonderful example of a book that you could use with children so that they can see themselves in it. Now, it's interesting, though, that when you actually use bilingual picture books, there are different types of bilingual picture books. There's the one I presented earlier on was actually, English on one side, and you turn it over and the full story in Spanish on the other side. This one has both languages. English on the left-hand page, and then followed by the Spanish on the right-hand page. And you can actually see here as well, English comes first and then Spanish. Sometimes it's inverted. You've got the minority language coming above the majority language. That's another conversation you can have with children as well. Okay, why would English come first? Why not Spanish? And why does Spanish have to come second? So you can actually have that conversation as well with children about the position of languages in the picture book. But the important thing, exactly. What hierarchy? Is there a hierarchy? Is this representing the hierarchy of languages, or is it just perhaps representing the reality of perhaps we use more English than Spanish? Perhaps there's more. So that's a discussion to have. I'm not saying that's what's happening. It's a discussion to have with the children, and that I have with my teachers when we actually look at different bilingual picture books. But the story is great because it represents the mixing of everything. She mixes everything wonderful, Marisol McDonald. And one of the things she does is she loves, so she mixes her languages. She wears very colorful clothes, polka dots and stripes and everything. And she loves eating peanut butter and jelly burritos. So she mixes food as well. Cultures. Exactly. And you can really see it really represents, there's so much you can do then in the classroom, for example, with children who have different cultures, and getting them, okay, how would you mix your cultures? And then they can come up with all these great, crazy ideas. But there's also, this book also represents an important element in being multilingual, and that is sometimes the pressure to conform. And the pressure to conform to the majority culture or to the context you're living in. For example, if you're living in France, should you only be speaking French at school? Do you have to be like everybody else, or can you just be your crazy multilingual mixed self? And then in this story, poor little Marisol, she has those pressures on her. And then there's a moment in the story where she decides, okay, I'm going to combina, I'm going to match. And suddenly, everything she is just disappears. I won't tell you the end of the story because I think you should all go out and buy the book because it's such a wonderful story. But it does also, so it's not just, so being multilingual, I think sometimes we talk about all the benefits of being multilingual, and there are so many wonderful benefits. It's fun, it's wonderful. But we sometimes forget to talk about the pressures of being multilingual. We forget about the having to deal with not necessarily comments that are perhaps not necessarily said in a negative way, not meant to hurt, but they do. Ideologies that we still can't get, that we debunk, myths about being multilingual that we can't debunk. So I think that, and this book deals with that pressure to conform and to sort of a monolingual way or a monocultural way of being. So it's important for multilingual children to see themselves in these stories, and more books are coming out like this, and we need more of these books actually.
Thank you very much for recommending this. It looks amazing. just as a story, but also for multilingual families.
Yeah.
And so you told us all that we can do with Picturebooks, and I guess for teachers there is a lot they can plan with it. At home, I feel like for example, when I buy a book to my sons, maybe they don't have the patience to wait and talk about the cover and go page by page. So if you speak to a teacher and if you speak to a parent, would you advise different things or different activities they can do, or would it more or less be the same?
I think it's obviously first of all going to depend on your child, on that relationship you have with your child, and you know your child better than anyone else. Do they have the patience? Yes. To look through, to start off by looking at the front cover. Oh, what do you think this is about? Oh, I wonder who this person is. I mean, do they have the patience for that? I mean, are they going to think, this is weird, what's my mom doing now? So this is, why don't you just read the story? So I think it depends on, the children. But the interesting thing about these discussions is that you can actually try and encourage them to perhaps use their different languages while you're having these discussions, you see, because if the book is in one of the heritage languages, perhaps the discussion can be in a translanguaging. So through translanguaging, perhaps you can also start bringing in the heritage language in discussing books, because we know in multilingualism how our languages, we use our languages in different domains. So, for example, you don't always use your heritage language for topics that might be discussed in picture books, So perhaps through engaging the children in a discussion about the topics, you can also engage them in using that heritage language to discuss a topic that they wouldn't normally discuss with you. I mean, why are you, this is, I just have just a very quick, for example, this is another book that I really, really like. It's called We Are the Water Protectors, and it's about the Dakota, the North American First Nations struggles for protecting their lands, and because of the pipelines coming through their lands, etc. So it's taking action, etc. Now this is probably a discussion you might not actually be having with your children in your heritage language, but through a picture book, perhaps it can come up, and then you can. Because one of the important things about multilingualism is how much vocabulary can you give children in a heritage language. When you just, when you're at home, what are you discussing? You're discussing, okay, go and call your grandma. What food are we eating today? What clothes are you wearing? Perhaps a little bit of, discussions about school. But you may not be discussing global issues. So perhaps through picture books, you can do that. So having that discussion may actually help. However, it does depend on the child. I remember clearly I read to my son, and I was reading Harry Potter to my son, and he just loved having me read Harry Potter to him until he was 13, which was quite amazing. I said, "Are you sure you still want me to read this?" Yeah. Come, let's read the next book. And he wanted me to read. So I would actually ask him, "Okay, well, why don't you read this chapter?" And he would look at me and say, "No, you read." He just loved having me read the book. So he was quite happy just lying there and listening to me read the book. And perhaps that's all that the child wants. So I didn't force him, okay, well, if you don't read the book, I'm not going to read this book anymore. I certainly didn't do that. I just kept reading. I kept reading the book, We read all the books except the last one. The last one said, I think we'll just go watch the film. Then we'll read the book at a later stage. But we did that process, those evenings, just before he went to bed, and we would sit there and I would read the book to him. He was quite satisfied with that. He didn't want to discuss it. He didn't want to read it himself. He just wanted to
spending some time with his mom. Reading
Exactly. And until he was 13, which for me was like, wow. So I think it's whatever you need to also sometimes listen to what the children are telling you about how they want you to, or how they want to engage with the reading or picture book or Harry Potter or whatever it is. If they're happy discussing, go for it. Don't, use that opportunity. If they're happy just listening to you, fine. Just read. The important thing is that you are starting getting them interested in reading and interested in listening to different languages and interested in reading in different languages. So especially at the beginning is getting them motivated and not sort of, pushing them away because you desperately want them to do something. No, it's letting them also sort of help you understand where they want to go and then going with them, and then wherever possible, pushing them a little bit further. So it's a, it's a give and take, I think, in this situation.
I think one thing you said that's very important as well for everyone to keep in mind is, even if our children can read, it doesn't mean that we have to push them to read, because especially when it's a language where they read less easily, if you push them, it can create a negative experience that they wouldn't want to read. But if you read to them, then they get more used to it, and when they're ready, they start reading the book themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my son could read. For example, I mean, he was reading novels because he was doing literature at school. He was, and it's not that he couldn't read. He just didn't want to. He just loved having me read to him. So there is that also, that kind of spending that time with your mum, your dad. So reading is it's a personal connection. It's a social connection. Like when you use a storybook in the classroom and you do the read aloud with the children get involved, it's a social event. When you read that picture book with your child, maybe before you go to bed or whenever it is that you read with your child, it's that personal connection. And that's all it was. It was my son just loving that personal connection. He was very happy, and I kept wondering, why doesn't he just read it himself? Nope. And I think I did the right thing. I mean, he is a reader today. He's now a young man. He is a reader today. He picks and chooses whatever books he wants to read, but he does read. So, it wasn't a kind of putting him off reading. It was just like, okay, you want me to read Harry Potter? We'll just carry on reading Harry Potter, no problem. It made me read Harry Potter as well. So.
We've done an interview with Adam Beck recently on the channel as well, and he said as well that he reads and he read to his children, so who are now teenagers, nearly adults, and he still reads with them, like reading aloud at breakfast. And yes, it creates a connection with our children when we do that. Yes, absolutely, and that's an important. It's part of that relationship that you can build, and it's also part of that multilingual relationship that you can build with children. When you're actually it's when you're able to read in the different languages, and when your child is actually open to not necessarily reading himself, but listening to you read in the different languages. So you're actually opening that multilingual avenue. You're actually allowing the children to see that, well, if mum and dad can do it, I can do it. And create a connection with books in that language as well. So maybe they're not comfortable yet to read, but little by little they will be. And if they find books that are interesting, there is a purpose to improve on their skills or maybe read more. It's like you said, it's opening this multilingual way to our children.
Yeah, I had one of the children in my research who used to read or listen to audiobooks. But there was in all the languages. So the fact that there were books in the house. First of all, are there books in your home? That's the question. Are there books in your home? How many picture books have you got in your home? And do you have picture books and books in the different languages that you speak as well? That's the other thing. So it's important for the children to see that, language is not just, like speaking Arabic to dad or Portuguese to mum or whatever. It's about having all these languages around, and doing something with them. So reading is something that you do with these languages as well. And it connects that identity. So whether it's audiobooks, whether it's mom or dad reading aloud, whether it's the child picking up a book, that he enjoys looking at and he's only looking at the pictures, it's having books in the house or having access to books that will eventually, make children readers. So that's an important connection. And also, I think, we try, one of the important things that a multilingual parent can do is build a sort of that language identity or language relationship with the child. And once you do that, whether it is through speaking, through literature, through books, through reading, that it's building that identity with the child, and in that particular language, that will then ensure that the child one day as an adult will speak and read and write that language.
Yeah. Now we have a comment from someone who's following us live.
Yeah.
It's a bit hidden by an emoji, but I tried to read it. So it says, some teachers would find it easy to use music than reading inside the classroom, and doing that a lot, or learning opportunities lost. So would it be lost opportunities to go through the more like listening to music, so more auditory than reading a book? I think that's what it is, partly hidden by an emoji. So I'm not sure, but I think that's what the question says.
Yeah. Well, I mean, music is a wonderful resource in any language classroom.
Yeah.
Because once again, music, language is already music in itself, because language already has a rhythm. Language has in every language has its own rhythm. So music always is an excellent resource for the children to actually pick up the rhythm of that language, the rhyming, and also for learning. Because as when you sing a song, and because of the rhythm of the song, it's so much easier to remember the words. So we use, for example, in English language teaching, we use music a lot from grade 1 to adults, etc. So music is an important resource to use in the classroom. It doesn't, however, mean that you don't use picture books, because I think some picture books are great because they also have that kind of rhythm. Because they also, especially cumulative books, rhyming, some picture books have a lot of rhyme in them, so they also have that rhythm. So it also depends on how the teacher reads the picture book. And which picture books you choose, which picture books you select, and for which reasons you select that picture book. So if you wonder, I mean, I don't think I have an example here of a picture book with a rhyme, but if you pick a picture book that allows you to work on rhyming, and that has a kind of I remember a picture book that we used right at the beginning when I started using picture books in classes, called the Kangaroo from Woolloomooloo. I don't even think it's edited anymore. I think it's out of print. But the Kangaroo from Woolloomooloo, and it was, the Kangaroo from Woolloomooloo. You had this kind of rhythm, and there was all the rhyming as well, using like animals from Australia. Okay, so you had all these animals from Australia, but there was all this rhyming, and there was a kind of a rhythm. It's like song. It's like music. It's like music.
Yeah.
So I think it really does depend on which picture books you find, why you pick that particular picture book, what do you want to do with a picture book in the classroom, and But I mean, both music and picture books are important, but you can also create music around a picture book.
Yes.
I remember once doing using a picture book about wolves in my class. It was the group of 9-10-year-olds, and then we used a song. I think it was a song from the group Aha. About wolves, if I'm not mistaken, or we changed the lyrics and we created a song connected to the picture book. So you see, so you can actually do that as well. So the picture book can include songs, and then we also had a picture book about the rainbow fish. And I remember creating a song at the end that with the children, creating a song based on that song from The Little Mermaid. So can you see? So you can use so many. You can connect the two, actually, picture books and music.
The picture book is the starting point, and you can add lots of things around.
Yes, and the picture book itself can be musical as well.
So one small thing I thought about before when you were showing these beautiful picture books is, so when we, now there is a lot more ebooks. What's your opinion on these ebooks regarding the experience from the children who are going to read them?
We have, there are, I think, if I'm not mistaken, every picture book has a read aloud online, has an online read aloud. Someone will be reading these, you know, like if you type in "we are the water protectors," you will find online read alouds. Some better than others, but you will find online read alouds. I think in this one, for example, Marisol McDonald, Monica Brown, the author, actually does a read aloud in both Spanish and English of her book. So they do exist online. They are a wonderful resource. They are these online read alouds can be a different way of working with the picture book. However, it's not the same as having the picture book in your hand.
Physically having it.
Yeah, because you as a teacher, for example, as you tell the picture book and as you turn the pages, and then you control the story. You control the discussion that you're having with the children. You decide when to turn the page, and you can also play around and say, you can say,
very slowly.
What do you see? Oh, did you see what I saw? That kind of thing. You can play around, which you can't do with a read aloud online, which has already been recorded online. However, the read alouds online can also be very beneficial. For example, if you decide to use a picture book in your classroom, and in order for, you know, and then you want the children to read the storybook, perhaps they don't have the picture book at home, but you want them to read the picture book with their parents. You can look at you can, you know, the parents can use the read aloud online. So it's not a matter of either or. It's a matter of how can you use both resources for the benefit of the children. And I think online resources can be used in many different ways. You can use them in positive ways as well. And then, of course, sometimes you have schools that just don't have money for picture books. I mean, that's a reality. And sometimes you have schools that have a really hard time finding the picture books, having the picture books delivered to where they are. Sometimes, I mean, there are wonderful bilingual picture books like from Canada and New Zealand that I've tried to buy here in Europe, and I can't. They're just not available, or they will not be delivered to where I live from New Zealand. So there's all of those barriers that we need to take into account. And obviously, in that case, a recorded online read aloud is a great opportunity to engage with a picture book. However, I do have physical picture books in the classroom because, you know, it's like the child goes, you know, if they have some kind of free time, and they go off to the corner with the picture books, they pick a picture book and they just say, look, you know, and they turn the pages. And they look through it and they turn the pages backwards and forwards. And that's an important part of engaging with a book.
Thank you very much. Just so Marianne replied, so it's the person who asked the question about music in the classroom, but she said it's an amazing idea to connect between picture books and music. And we have another question. Can you please talk a little bit about what you include in the 30 weeks picture book course?
Yes, we start
30 weeks or 30 hours?
No, 30 hours, sorry, 1 week, 30 hours, intensive 1 week, 30-hour course. We included, well, first of all, you know, the first day would be based on engaging with a picture book, the front cover, the back cover, the inside cover, the characters, the colors, the title, and the language and the theme. So, for example, if this book is about, if we're going to work with this book and it's about the water protectors, and we're talking about the indigenous First Nations in North America fighting for their rights to their land, then, you know, we would look at, okay, how do you introduce this theme? So we look at ways of introducing this theme, perhaps some pictures. I mean, this is probably a book I would use with 9, 10-year-olds, 11, 12-year-olds. And so how do you deal with the theme? How do you bring up this theme? What can you have? What discussions can you have around this theme? We would probably talk about Native Americans. Who are they? What do we know about them? Why are they fighting? Why do they need to fight for their water and their land? What happened? All that kind of thing. So we highlight, we're bringing that. So the first lesson is very much around, introducing the theme, the story. Then we move on to perhaps doing some language work, because that's also an important element in learning. So we would perhaps pick on, perhaps certain structures in the book, so that the children can engage with the language, vocabulary, grammatical structures, etc. And then we would also have an artistic element where the children would create something, an artistic craft around the theme of the picture book. And we've had some wonderfully creative ideas, like where a picture book had spiders, and the children created a real spider out of cloth, and then and they were very proud. So part of that, so we had I suppose a kind of a CLELT approach. CLELT is content and language integrated learning, where the children had an art element where you actually created something, but all through whatever the target language would be. And then you can also create, do some kind of drama activities where the children can dramatize the story. You can also do cross-curricular work activities, depending on what it is, depending on the potential of a picture book. You can do dramatize a book, etc. So there's a lot you can do in those 30 hours. The one thing I would like to mention is, and if you're actually looking for ideas and ready-made resources, I would highly recommend you look at the ICEPEL. I'm not quite sure you've got that link. I don't know if we've actually discussed this, but
I don't think you gave it to me, but we can send, put it in the
we can add it, yes. We can add it, because I was working in a project called ICEPEL, which is basically intercultural citizenship education in English, through Picturebooks in English language learning. And we actually created what we call ICE kits, and they are basically teacher resources that work around one picture book. This is one of them. So there is a whole teacher resource for this picture book. For example, we have 18 picture books, 18 ICE kits on the website. So a teacher can go there and download those kits and basically use them. And then if they want, they can even create their own kits, their own ICE kits for any other picture book that they use. But these ICE kits are based on, 5 lessons, and then also they take it beyond the classroom. So how can a picture book like this encourage children to do some action taking outside the classroom? What can we do about protecting Indigenous rights, beyond the classroom? So those resources are absolutely amazing. And also the other thing that this project has is a selection question document, where you can actually go through that document and tick the boxes, decide, okay, if I want to book around this theme, and okay, does this book have what I want? So you can look at the selection document and tick, 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 and say, yes, this book actually has exactly what I want. So it helps you refine your choice. So as a teacher, it helps you refine your choices, and then or decide, okay, so I wanted this book for identity, but perhaps this book is best for global issues. So you can go through that, but there is all the resources on the ICEPEL. And so if you don't mind adding it afterwards to the site,
thank you very much.
Great, because there's a lot in there. And then go on.
Sorry, I was going to say it's such a great guidance, because you have 18 examples of what you can do. So you can look at different things and think, okay, I want to use this picture book in my language because it doesn't exist. But I can use that and maybe pick some activities from here. That's a good idea as well to include. Wow, that's a great resource.
And I will send you another link from a group called Pep Health, which is picture books in English language teaching in Europe. And once again, loads and loads of picture books, a description of the picture books, and then these mini lessons that you can actually also use in the classroom based on Picturebook. So there's a lot out there, but we will send you the link and you can add it, and then people can go in and have a look, or they can also contact me if they want. But there is a lot that for teachers, this is especially important for teachers because we're all very busy people. And when you have something that that's ready made and that's been, it's now published, it's part of an Erasmus project. So, and it's got the resources are really amazing. And then the Picturebooks that all touch on important issues. Not just language, but also different issues.
Wow. I have another question from Marie Lingo, who is asking, do you emphasize a specific language skill or include or concentrate on speaking and comprehension through Picturebooks?
We work with both oral, oral and written. We also always include the writing element. Like, for example, with grade 1 students, we would look at perhaps having them, match words and pictures, write simple words and simple sentences, but there will be a literacy element all the time. So we start with the oral. Obviously, we start with the whole, okay, what's this, how's this? We start with the oral, we start with, like in an English language classroom, we would start with the oral pronunciation, drillings, okay, so water, make sure that the children can say water, make sure the children can say protectors, etc. But then, and then obviously it will depend on the language of the book. How can you extend work around language? But we will include both oral and written, because I think language comes in written forms,
Yes.
so I think it's important to engage with the written format as well, with the written forms of language as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we've passed the hour, so I don't want to keep you too long, but is there any last thing you think is important for people to know about Picturebooks or how to use Picturebooks? Or have we covered everything you think is important?
Well, I'm not quite sure if we ever managed to cover everything around Picturebooks, but I would say, just a kind of a recap, I would say that when you think of a Picturebook, think of it as the first access that children have to art. It's their first experience of art.
That's true.
So this is an art. This is art. The illustrations, these are artists that create these illustrations, but the illustrations in connection with the words and how they interact with words is an artistic experience. So when you're actually when you're working with Picturebooks and children, you are actually not only bringing in literacy and visual, you're actually starting them on the road to appreciating art. So I think I would just like to end with that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for sharing all your experience. It's been a very interesting conversation. And so we have comments saying very interesting. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Yoshito.